Hello and welcome to the Affirmusic podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to exploring the intersection of music, positivity, and personal growth. I'm your host, Dan Laureano. I am a songwriter, producer, mixer, and all-around creative. Welcome to episode 2. We're going to start doing things a lot differently. First of all, it's been 3 months since I posted episode 1, and if you haven't heard it, please go back and take a listen. But I'm opening it up a bit because unfortunately I have just been spending so much time racking my brain trying to make everything perfect that I kind of forgot about using current events as just kind of a gateway to get into this podcast and talk about the things that we want to talk about here. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm really going to start relating this to the bigger picture of what's going on in the zeitgeist, for lack of a better word, or just in the general area of music. So that could be really anything from current events or just something that strikes my fancy at the particular moment in time that I'm recording. So this week is an interesting week, and these past few weeks have been really interesting. There's definitely a few things I want to get into and kind of relate them to the overall theme of the podcast. Sadly, just a couple of days ago, we learned of the news of Steve Albini passing away. And for those who don't know, Steve Albini was an engineer, a record producer, had an extensive career, and really was a person of great integrity and who held a really specific ethos within the world of music, in the music industry, which I would beg to say that he would say if he were here that he was really not a part of the music industry per se, because he really kept an ethos that kept him separate from the usual goings-ons of something that, I think he may have thought was more of a hindrance to music and creativity. And again, Steve Albini being an amazing recording engineer and producer, although he didn't like to think of himself as a producer, and he tried to stay out of the creative aspect of producing as much as possible. He was a producer in the regard that he organized sessions, booked studios for the acts, and would make sure everything was done in a timely fashion. In fact, he preferred to do things in a couple of days, or if not a week or 2 weeks. Something like 6 months it would be crazy to him. This was just kind of how he got down as an engineer and a producer. But as a producer, he really wanted to stay out of the way of what the band's vision was and really just be there to support their vision. And I think he tried to do the same thing as well as a mixer, because he was a mixer. So his passing is just a great loss for me. When I think of him, I think of Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. I think of In Utero by Nirvana, 2 records that he engineered and produced. And there's some funny things about those records, particularly In Utero. There had been an incident prior to that where he had produced one song for the band Helmet, which is another band I really admire and love from the early 90s, a heavy band. He had produced one record for them, engineered one record for them called In the Meantime, from the album Meantime. And apparently he did not produce or engineer the rest of the record. And so when it came time for mixing this record, they brought in a mixer. Of course, I'm assuming, Steve had already mixed the song he had worked on. And they brought in a mixer to remix what Steve had done. And he really wasn't happy with the results. And that person was the famous engineer, producer, mixer, Andy Wallace, who's mixed some incredible records. You can look him up. It's just too extensive, but there's records that he's mixed that are just classics that you know and love. But Steve wasn't really happy with these results. So he actually did not want Andy Wallace to pop in again and remix what he did for In Utero, because actually Andy Wallace had done the same thing on Nevermind. Butch Vig famously produced that record with Nirvana and actually did mixes for them as well, but no one was really happy with those mixes, including Butch Vig himself, and they brought in Andy Wallace, who did, of course, a classic, amazing job with that record, and that record is super famous and had an amazing sound, and a lot of that had to do with the finishing touches that Andy put on it. So again, getting back to Steve Albini, he did not want Andy Wallace to come in and do that. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, with In Utero, the record label was not happy with Steve's mixes and actually employed somebody else, somebody by the name of Scott Litt, who was also a mixer who did a lot of REM stuff, to come in and redo In Utero. So I always say that to say, if you go on some of these streaming services, or perhaps you have physical copies of this stuff, there was a reissue of In Utero that included some of the mixes that Steve Albini did for In Utero. So you can go back and listen to those and then A/B the ones that Scott Litt has done. And I was actually doing that today, and it's really amazing. I really love some of the stuff that Albini had in mind. But then when you listen to the Scott Litt stuff, you can see, you can hear what the differences are and why they seem to be a little more commercially appealing. I mean, even down to the fact that in a song like Heart-Shaped Box, and this may have been from input from the band. Perhaps they recorded all these extra things and then decided when mixing that they didn't want them, but ultimately they're in the final recordings. If you listen to Heart-Shaped Box and A/B those, the Steve Albini version does not feature a lot of the background vocals that Kurt did, that are kind of like integral to the song as we know it today, harmonies and such. And, I would venture to say that the mix is cleaner, the one that Scott Litt did. But, again, this is Steve Albini taking input from the band, mixing these songs according to how he was hearing them as well. And it's just a little more raw. But funny to say raw, because I go back and listen to In Utero today, an album that sounded so amazing and hi-fi to me at the age of 14 when it came out in 1993, and listening to it today in 2024, it really does not sound as hi-fi as I remember it. It sounds kind of raw in a lot of ways still, and that has to do with the recording of Steve, as well as just the music from the band, and being the two, I can see a lot of things that Steve, really captured that I love, and also a lot of things that Scott Litt was able to bring out in the mixes that I really enjoy. So all of this to say is that there is not one way to do anything in mixing, in music, in anything really. And if there's one thing I want you guys out there to gain from this podcast, it is that there is absolutely not one way to do anything. And you have everything available to you as far as music. And don't ever let someone tell you that there's a right or a wrong way. That really, really is not the way to go. You got to be open-minded. You should perhaps consider being open-minded. This is something that's come up in the last couple of weeks, this incident with, and I wouldn't call it an incident because I don't think both parties have actually had a conversation, but there is this video where musician Jacob Collier comes out and is criticizing Rick Rubin's view on songwriting. And what Rick Rubin had said, to paraphrase what Jacob Collier is actually criticizing, is the fact that he says, as a songwriter, you should just write songs for you and not think about your audience. Your audience basically comes last. And that's actually something I agree with. Jacob takes issue with that. And he goes further to say that the people that are listening to this, Rick's audience, are actually people that he feels may see creativity as something novel. And that's where Jacob really loses me, because actually some of the fans of Rick Rubin and the people who have read his book are some of the most creative people. And creativity is not something novel to them. I think that maybe what he was trying to get across, and I can believe this, is that maybe some of the people who are reading Rick's book now and have not maybe read several books on creativity in the past, have maybe not entered into several conversations about creativity in the past. And this is a generalization, and I don't even know that that's true, but perhaps Rick is just opening their eyes to the idea of creativity in a more academic sense where it's discussed. But they've been creative their whole lives and their whole musical lives, they've been engaged in the act of creativity. So I would argue to say that there's nothing for them to learn about creativity, and indeed that it is not something that is novel. So I'm definitely on Rick's side, even though Rick, hasn't come out, I don't believe, and said anything directly to respond to this. But Jacob is saying that you should consider the audience when you're writing. And I personally don't agree with that. I think that you write the song, and then when you're arranging it and producing it, you might have those considerations. Specifically production, you can produce any song, take any song and produce it and arrange it to sound like a song in any genre. So that's when those really real considerations would come into effect. But I mean, if you're really in tune with your audience and you want to write something for them, there's no reason why you shouldn't, So I guess I would say that I see both sides, but there's no absolutes. So no one should be saying things are one way. In defense of Rick, I think he's talking about pure creativity that comes from you, and pure creativity that comes from you doesn't and perhaps shouldn't have outside factors coming into that. So that's my whole take on that. Again, there is not one way to do anything. In the last couple of weeks, last month, however long, it's really apparent now that AI music is coming out. It's coming. Some people are freaking out. Some people are saying it's just another tool. Again, I can play both sides. I can see what the benefits might be and what the detriments might be. And, there's some really valid opinions floating out there about this stuff. I'll let you decide. Personally, I've been playing with a website called kits.ai where you actually upload an audio file. So this would be you singing an entire song. You can upload that, and then it will convert it to another voice. Now, this site doesn't actually use celebrity voices. It only uses voices that they say are licensed for your use, and therefore you can use them in your productions without having to worry about copyright or anything like that. So I think that's actually a positive thing. Although, do we want to listen to robot people? Is this the same as putting an effect on your voice, dropping an audio file and spitting out someone else's voice? I mean, it still has your fluctuations in pitch. It still has your delivery. So there's something to be said about that. I mean, for someone like me who's not really comfortable all the time with their voice on a record, this could be interesting. I mean, is it much different than copying and pasting vocals inside of a digital audio workstation and perhaps tuning those or perhaps pitch shifting those? Is it really that different? You have to think about that. But then there's the other side where, people are just taking celebrity voices and making whole songs. Now, if those songs are being used for reference, I don't think there's a real problem with it. If they're being used for memes, I think that could be interesting. It's parody. It's copyright protected. But again, these people did not license their voices. So there is some murkiness with that, I think, There's definitely some murkiness in the whole AI thing. It is true. These AI models do scrape the internet for what they spit out. And basically, there's copyright infringement written all over it. And the cat's kind of out of the bag right now. Legislation is really slow with this stuff. At the end of the day, there's other sites like Suno.ai and another one called Udio, where you can put in a prompt and a style of music and it will spit out an entire song. You can say, write a song about a rainy day in the style of the Beach Boys. And at least one of those websites will say back to you, well, we can't do it in the style of the Beach Boys, but we'll do a 1960s, pop boy band California style song. And it'll still sound like the Beach Boys when it comes out. And I've heard a lot of this stuff. It's super impressive how it sounds. It can definitely fool the ear. Skilled musicians can probably tell that actually it's not the real thing. There's some weird artifacts right now. There's just, little tells that can make you understand that this is not a real person singing or performing. But again, this is early in the game. Next year, you will not be able to tell the difference. And that's really scary for a lot of people. I don't think it should stop you from creating, And I don't think it should stop you from using it, but I think maybe there should be constraints around the usage. So hopefully we can all kind of have some consensus about that, and maybe there needs to be some legislation about that. But at the end of the day, I'm telling people live music is not going to die, right? Nobody wants to see a robot perform a song, really. I mean, we have DJs and people argued against DJs, and now people love DJs and going to see DJs. Live music hasn't died. Going to see bands hasn't died. It's just opened up another avenue. I don't see people going to see just computers perform. It's just, I saw Kraftwerk perform at Coachella back in 2008, and that was seriously boring. Kraftwerk being one of the greatest groups ever formed in electronic music. But it was three guys on three different parts of the stage, just standing there with laptops, not engaging with the audience and just pressing buttons. It was the most boring, horrible thing I've ever seen in my life. And that's Kraftwerk. So take that for what it is. So I want to know what you guys think, definitely hit me up on Instagram, TikTok, also at Affirmusic. Connect with me there. Let me know what you think about these topics. And again, rest in peace to Steve Albini. And Jacob, please reconsider what you're talking about, because I don't think you're really, I'm not sure. I don't know if that was a really well thought out admission of yours. But anyway, anybody can say what they want, right? This is this day and age, right? So I have my opinions and they have theirs, and everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and we can discuss them and be respectful and, take from them what we will. And we don't have to be angry about it. We can just have our own opinion, formulate our own opinion, and, connect with people who resonate with you and do things that way. And that's the way I feel about it. So just to end this episode, I want to start reading from the book that I wrote, Affirmusic, Affirmations for Musicians. And because the idea of songwriting came up today, especially in that conversation about Rick and Jacob, I want to read a page from the chapter on composition. And these are just 5 affirmations from the book. You can use them to just kind of reinforce these good ideas for you. These are positive affirmations that will help you in music, I believe. So the first one, and I'll read the rest after. I always have songs inside my mind just waiting to come out. I always have songs inside my mind just waiting to come out. I can write however many songs I want, whenever I want. I can write however many songs I want, whenever I want. The song already exists. I just need to grab it. The song already exists. I just need to grab it. I am an amazing creator of music. I am an amazing creator of music. The music is always available to me. The music is always available to me. So that's just a few of the affirmations in this book. There's 500 total about, and different topics. Like I said, there's the chapter on creativity, and I'm just thumbing through it right now. Also, not creativity, I'm sorry. There's a chapter on composition, practice, performance, business, musicianship, philosophy, music production and technology, inspiration, gratitude and mindset. And you know what? In the next book, I probably will put a chapter on creativity itself. Not a novel idea. Again, connect with me on social media. I hope you enjoyed the podcast today, and I will be around for the next one. I hope you will enjoy your week, your month in music. Get out there, make music, be positive about it, be open-minded about it. Know that you are the one creating it, and no one can tell you how to do it. Do it your own way.